What's up, guys? Welcome to Fantasy Smack Talk. It's so good to talk about fantasy football. The college draft or the NFL draft, where they pick college players, you know what I mean, is all said and done, so we get to shoot a video, talk about the rookies. So before we get into it, Dustin, what's our overall thought on rookies?
We don't necessarily like them in fantasy land. They do have value, but a lot of times it's the guys that end up getting drafted in the last rounds, like Mike Williams last year, or running backs that you didn't necessarily think were going to have the job. The most hyped rookies normally are the ones that do the work.
Right,
but
so don't overdraft names. And one of the biggest names that is going to get overdrafted is AJ Green of the Bengals. Now, he's got all the talent in the world, and if you're in a dynasty league, you probably should be going first because he could have a great career, but it's not going to be this year with Andy Dalton throwing him the ball.
Next, we have Julio Jones. Atlanta gave up an arm and a leg to get this guy, and people are going to fall in love with his situation. A good offense, Matt Ryan throwing the ball, Roddy White taking pressure off of him, but we just don't think there's going to be enough balls to go around, especially with Tony Gonzalez out there as well, for him to have a huge year. But he's a great talent on a great offense, could have a decent rookie year.
Next, we got a sleeper that we like. This is a guy you can get at the very end of your draft that could blow up, and that's Baldwin out there with the Chiefs. He was a Pitt graduate, and he had no quarterback help his entire year while he was playing out there. Now he's got Matt Castle on the ball. He's a big receiver, great in the red zone. This is the guy that you should be taking in your last round, kind of a sneaky pick.
Moving on, a guy who also can go in the really late rounds is Greg Little. This guy didn't play at all his senior year, but they were still impressed enough with him out there with the Browns to take him with their second-round pick. So obviously they see something in this guy. You know, he violated some regulations. That's why he didn't play, so he has some character flaws, but Holmgren sees something in him. Browns have been looking for a #1 receiver for years. He could be the guy.
Now, the only rookies that really normally have a big impact their rookie season, or that potentially could, it seems, is the running back. So Dustin, start with the biggest name.
Mark Ingram, obviously the biggest name in running back land, went to a decent situation with the Saints, but as we've seen over the last few years, the Saints just love to spread the ball around with their running backs. We think he'll probably, get a decent amount of goal lines and get his touches, but we just don't see him getting enough touches to be an absolute stud.
Next is our early favorite for Fantasy Rookie of the Year, and that's Thomas out there with the Dolphins.
Loves him.
The reason why is Ronnie Brown might be gone, Ricky might be gone. That's what the early reports are saying. So he's going to be the featured back. Just got to love the fact he's going to get the touches and a decent O-line. If you're drafting really early, this is a guy to grab because it gets closer to the season. We guarantee he's going to shoot up draft boards.
Moving on, another guy that could definitely shoot up some draft boards is Halou for the Redskins. If it's one thing we've learned about Mike Shanahan, it's that he can find some diamond-in-the-rough running backs that fit his scheme. They traded up to get this guy, so obviously they like him, and we think he can definitely compete with Terrain for some carries out there in Washington.
And last running back we're going to talk about is LaShore with the Lions. This really speaks more about Best than LaShore. Best, after that huge week, I think it might have been week 4, really started tailing off. And they say Best is going to be the starter and LaShore is the change of pace. But it's kind of weird because LaShore is more of the prototypical first and down second back, while Best is a great third down back. Regardless, you're probably going to want to have to steer clear of both these guys going into the year.
Moving on, let's talk about Cam Newton, the #1 pick overall. We don't necessarily like it. No clue what Carolina's doing, taking another quarterback early in the draft. Cam Newton, we don't see him having enough help out there in Carolina to really put together a decent fantasy rookie season. He might be able to produce a little bit with his legs, get some rushing touchdowns, but we just don't see much happening out there, and we think it could actually even be a pretty ugly year for him.
Next, we have Blaine Gabbert. The Jags moved up to 10 to pick him. David Garrard's just got to be pissed. He had one of his best years. He gets no respect ever, fantasy or otherwise. But Gabbert's probably not going to start. They'll give it to Garrard. And then whenever they start losing, the fans are going to call for him regardless. No value here.
Moving on, we got Locker with the Titans. All signs are looking like Vince Young is done. Locker could be the starter from day one. And with Kenny Britt out there and Chris Johnson taking some pressure off of him, he could have a decent year, but we don't expect the Titans to ask him to do that much.
And the last guy we're going to talk about is Andy Dalton. Carson Palmer is either going to get traded or move or retire. That's how much he hates a terribly run organization that the Bengals are.
Oh, they're so good.
God, they're awful.
They do so many things right.
Regardless, Dalton he doesn't have a prayer. Don't even be thinking about taking him in the draft, but he will start, so we got to talk about him.
Now, we did a post where we pretty much do a write-up on all the rookies that we think could have value this year. It's going to be up on the site, so you're going to want to check that out. And also, we're going to have another video coming up where we do kind of our mock first round of who we think is going to be the first round.
Arian Foster, we're going to talk about him again.
He's going to go early. He's going to go early. So definitely check that out. And as always, get in those forums and let's start talking some football. I'm Dustin. This is Nameco. We'll see you in a couple weeks.